Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for this very important moment. It is an opportunity for us to celebrate the life of somebody who is very special to all of us, especially those that have had the privilege of knowing Gary Nunes as long as some of we have. And we're very privileged that also Gary's wife, Kathy, and children are also joining us as well. Stephen and Jenny, together Jenny with her husband Ryan, are joining us as well online. And we'll have a chance to, for those that will be traveling on Saturday to the funeral, we'll have a chance to see them in person and pass on our condolences in person. But this is an opportunity for us to, again, celebrate the life of somebody who made such an important difference to many of us, to all of us, but in particular to this company. And Gary Nunes is certainly a person who I can say that was one of the foundational building blocks of this company. Gary passed away in June of this year at a very premature age, and we're very sad that he wasn't able to be here. He always enjoyed these summer barbecues. This is a tradition that goes back to almost as long as the company's been around. The summer barbecue before a long weekend. And something that Gary really, really enjoyed and always participated in. And there's lots of memories. And there's a few pictures in this slide presentation that'll demonstrate that as well. So I thought it was very fitting to do this celebration of his life in conjunction with the summer barbecues, which he very much enjoyed. There's a number of alumni that have joined us here in person and that are also online. And some of them will have an opportunity to say a few words. But thank you especially to our Rodan alumni for coming and joining us for this very important time. I know it's sad, but I really, when I think about Gary's life, it just brings a smile to my face in terms of his demeanor, who he was as a person, his contribution to Rodan. It really is astonishing, and he was always there, even when after he retired. And I remember it's one of those things where Alex had a similar experience. Luncheon was here with us. That as long as he had the Rodan laptop at home, he was always connected. So at some point, Gary said, "Paul, here's my laptop, and you know where to call me if you absolutely need me, but don't expect me to answer Rodan emails any longer." And but he was always there for us whenever we needed him. Our program will be quite brief. I have a short presentation here. We followed with remarks from Kathy Nunes and her children, Steve and Jenny. We have Alex Luncheon, who's going to say a few words, Nishant Kahani, Gary Gunther, Barry Simpson, Penny McLeod, Andrew Lamb, and Rachel Ingram, although she has passed on her regrets. Her mother just went into the hospital and she had to bow out, but she did send me a few words, which I'll read to everybody, and then some concluding remarks. So without further ado, let me start off.
At Rodan, we keep one step ahead of our comfort level. So once you think you have everything down, you're operating very well, your teams are working to the top level, we try and go that one extra step. So we get out of that comfort zone. It forces us to keep on our toes. It also allows us to be prepared for new opportunities and to keep a good eye on our competitors so they don't get the best of us.
Gary's had a remarkable career. Prior to joining Rodan, Gary had a long, illustrious career at Measurement Canada for 23 years, where he was the Ontario District and Regional Director. He was the head of ISO metering at Oshawa PUC, where I first met Gary. He's also involved in a number of entrepreneurial initiatives before joining Rodan, including getting involved in a number of pioneering unbundling initiatives and strategic market development, especially with respect to billing and other innovations in the sector. I will share the one quick story about when I first met Gary. And in fact, Alex has known Gary longer than I have, but I met Gary when we first bought our metering services company called Canadian Meter Services in Belleville, Ontario in 2003. And we bought the company, and as I was getting to know the business, I researched the other metering service provider companies and realized there was another MSP based in Oshawa. And I thought, well, you know what? I'm traveling from Toronto to Belleville to our new business. Well, I should pop in and meet the people from Oshawa Metering Services Company. And I looked up Gary Nunes on the website, gave him a call, and said, Gary, could we meet? Love to meet with you. And so that's where our relationship started. We used to meet at least once a month for probably 6 months, where I would pop into Oshawa, have breakfast with Gary Nunes in Oshawa, and really learn a lot about the metering services business. And Gary demonstrated that he was a wealth of knowledge. And it took me about 6 months, but I finally convinced him to join the Rodan team. So, and the rest is history. And Gary has been a foundation of who we are as a company today. So that's where I refer to Gary as one of the originals. And we've got Alex, we've got Gary Gunther, and in fact, Peter Kruger, some may remember, he's come back as well as again, one of the originals. So this goes back to 2004. He was our senior executive vice president of engineering services. Those who remember Gary's office, we always thought that it was a health and safety risk with this wall of binders behind him, which of course we've all digitized since then. Kathy, as you probably imagine, took us a whole summer of students to digitize all of Gary's documentation, but it was quite astounding. And as you can see here on the far right, there's a picture of me, Alex, Boris, and Gary there, the executive leadership team way back when. Gary was an avid sportsman, enjoyed a little bit of golf, but really enjoyed ping pong. And he was able to compete with the best of us when it came to ping pong, even giving up here to Julian a few years ago. He was a great mentor. He was always there for his team, and I think many of us here in this room are recipients of his amazing mentorship. He was certainly one of the team. He, as I mentioned, really enjoyed all of our various activities and was very much influential in the types of activities that we did hold, and was always there to supporting the team. He was certainly a great husband, and really enjoyed getting to know Kathy over the years, attended all of our various events, our holiday parties, and was very fond of his family. And that was hence one of the reasons why he said, you know what, I'm going to retire. I'm going to spend the last few years of my life really enjoying his family. And he certainly kept healthy. He really was very enthralled with his family, his children, his grandchildren, and really was a wonderful all-round man. Great grandfather, and there's a great picture of Gary and his family. Spent a lot of time with them. And I just want to share maybe a little lighter note here, the evolution of Gary Nunes. And I don't know whether Gary Gunther is on the line. I think I see his number there. But this is, I think, early on when Gary Nunes first joined Rodan. And you could tell he had a bit of mustache here. And it didn't take long for him to get, I guess, poked fun at by Gary Gunther. Gary Gunther had a great nickname for Gary Nunes. He called him Whiskers. So he called him Whiskers up until the point where Gary started to shave his mustache. So that was only the early days of Gary Nunes with a mustache. And as you could tell, he's evolved. We caught him on one of his few grumpy days here in this picture. But he was always smiles, always had a calm demeanor, and was always somebody that we could rely on. Whether you were somebody who worked on the engineering team or part of the senior executive team, he was always there to support us.
There's a sense of fulfillment that I get from working in Rodan every day, which I never got with other jobs in both private and public sectors.
So a big thank you to Gary. He will certainly be missed, and he'll always be remembered. Thank you. I want to now turn it over to Kathy Nunes, who's online. Kathy, we're going to, let me just give me a second here to switch here so I can stop sharing. Oops. All right. Just bear with me here. Okay, so we now want to belong. We want to put the how do I get the speaker to be on the screen? Okay, there we go. Okay. Kathy and Stephen, please welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Paul, thank you for inviting me to say a few words about what working at Rodan had meant to Gary. I recall when Gary was first welcomed by you to join your newly formed Rodan company that he was at that time working very hard to start up his own company, and so was at first reluctant. However, where you provided him with the opportunity and incentives in bringing his own small business into your own, he saw an excellent opportunity to greatly expand the business of Rodan while teaming up with and working alongside a number of others who, like himself, had very many years of experience working within the energy services industry. Today, I am a living witness of the sense of pride and accomplishment he felt as he watched this come to fruition over the years in which he called the Rodan team his other family. Often the first to unlock the office doors in the morning and quite often the last to leave the office at night, especially during those earlier years. My husband seemed to thrive on the many challenges he faced working at Rodan and very much enjoyed seeing the new and up-and-coming additions as these were welcomed into the company as it continued to grow and expand. And as Gary took part in mentoring those who would move up in the company and one day assume positions within the very core team of people that had formed its earliest foundation. Paul, as president of Rodan, one of the major competitors in the energy services industry today, I am also aware of your position and level of responsibility within the Ukraine Congress, and so all the more overwhelmed with gratitude for the level of support and care you have extended to me and my children, Steve and Jenny, since hearing of my husband's passing. And I cannot thank you enough for the ways in which you have honored Gary's life and his years of service as a Rodan employee. It speaks to me as to why Gary so valued his years of working alongside you and others he came to know well, both as highly respected colleagues and as dearly remembered friends. For those of you participating in this celebration who may or may not have had the opportunity of working with Gary, I'm sure if he were able to speak to you now, he'd offer words of encouragement towards working hard, striving for excellence, and keeping a clear and strong vision toward the continued success of Rodan Energy Solutions. As your contributions towards its success will surely be recognized and well rewarded. Thank you, Paul. And thank you, everyone, for participating in this celebration of Gary's life and for your donations to the Heart and Stroke Foundation. I sincerely hope and pray that further research will lead to the saving of many lives.
Thank you, Paul, and everyone. We really appreciate the support, and I think Dad would be very happy for this. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Kathy.
I wanted to say thank you as well. This is really special that you've put this together for him, and I know that he would be smiling down on us today. Thank you.
Our pleasure, and thank you very much for joining us. I'll now turn it over to a longtime friend of Gary's, somebody who worked very closely with him, both before Rodan and during Rodan. I'd like to ask Alex Luncheon to say a few words. Please, Alex.
Okay, sure. Okay, my method of presenting my thoughts here are going to be semi-technical because it's technical milestones that trigger friendships and things like that for me. So just a bit of background. In the wholesale metering sphere, there are triangular relationships like Measurement Canada, ISO, and MSP. In the 1980s, anybody here still remember the 1980s? Okay, maybe a couple. The same triangular relationship included Measurement Canada, again, Ontario Hydro, and the Ontario Hydro Metering Department, supported by district PNC metering techs, some of which are still around too, like Alan James, Rich Rollinson, Gilles Barrier retired recently, those guys across the province. So I first met Gary in 1985 while I was on rotation from the field at PNC to Ontario Hydro head office to support commissioning of a MMIS, which was the main metering database that was a mainframe. And that just allowed the 636 forms, which you all are all familiar with, to be manually transferred from paper to keyboard to a central computer. Okay? And this was being done around the clock almost. So where does Gary fit into this? Well, these 636 forms were also copied to Measurement Canada and to Power Billing, which was still part of Hydro. And Measurement Canada, the Ontario office, was headed by Mr. Nunes. Okay, so because of this database, I have to collaborate with Gary, who covered the Ontario territory, to determine what process modifications would be required in handling these forms, because we're not keeping them. So that involved face-to-face meetings with Gary. And what a surprise did I find in Gary's office. Binders, wall-to-wall binders, and stacks and stacks of 636 forms. You can just imagine, as they came in, the envelopes, they just got stacked. Okay, so since Measurement Canada had no access to this database, how would the Measurement Canada like to receive the new updated forms? So no panic. The mild-mannered Gary News indicated that the 636 forms were only references whenever billing issues arose. So we then collaborated on some practicality matters that would have mutual benefits to Measurement Canada and to Ontario Hydro. So in short order, Gary and I resolved the matter by declaring the Hydro database an essential MC record with 7-year backup, just like income tax, government. On an exceptions basis, any 636 form that was needed, we would print and fax. So this resolution saved Gary from handling and storing all those 636 forms, and saved Hydro labor. So from this point on, Gary was a frequent collaborator who was always welcoming technology-driven changes in metering and was very generous with his time and advice. So I have one more example. There we go. So one example of his generosity was during Ontario Hydro's joined Rodan in 2003, thereabouts, I was relieved that his ISO knowledge was now available to us, along with his familiarity with all the Ontario municipal utilities. Very soon, the shelves in his office were going up at that time, right? He comes in, the binders go in. So for the next 20 years, Gary and I worked closely together at Rodan, especially when dealing with the ISO, Measurement Canada, RFPs, and client issues, since registration and operations were innately intertwined. As expected, not all client contacts have desirable personalities, but we apply the customer is always right attitude as often as possible to enhance the relationship. On a few occasions, Gary's off-the-record comment would be, why can't we just fire the client? He doesn't have to stay quiet that way. However, as evidenced by Rodan's sound customer base, this was never necessary, okay? So in fact, Gary Nunes was ever the diplomat, a great communicator and strategist, always available for consultation, and most of all, he will be sorely missed. Thank you.
I'd like to invite Nishant Kahani, who is, I would say, a mentee of Gary's, someone who worked very closely with Gary while here at Rodan. Nishant is an illustrious alumni at a consulting firm, BBA, and welcome, Nishant. Thank you for coming.
Hi, everyone. It's really good to see a lot of familiar faces, but it's also incredible to see there's a lot of newer faces in your family. I would have been about 25 when Gary hired me back in 2010, so I would have been the age of some of the younger people in your group here today. Gary obviously knew a lot about the industry, but he also knew where his, I guess, strengths ended. So engineering, for example, as a function, we all know Gary wasn't necessarily an engineer. He didn't want to get into the nitty gritty of, all the engineering aspects of this business. And yet engineering was an important function to Rodan. So, I see him as a leader who always believed in removing obstacles in front of people. He knew that some of the people like myself that he hired, we were basically going to be participating in a fairly niche industry. And for that, as far as, removing some of my obstacles that I would have likely faced as a young engineer back then at this company, I can remember distinctly that he went out of his way. He had an incredible set of networks from, past former utility folks, a lot of people that he worked at Measurement Canada with, and he arranged a series of workshops for us. And I know this wasn't something that I would have taken for granted, because I know it took him a lot of time and effort to get a hold of these people, chase them down. Many of these were retired people at the time, and effectively, there was certainly a lot of friction involved in arranging some of these workshops. And I can go back and look at this as one of the ways in which he really wanted to remove obstacles in order to let people succeed. Of course, we know Gary as a person who, was the type of person who would let people play from their strengths. He was always the glass half full type of personality. He was certainly not, of the micromanaging type. He was a big picture person who often, I think, believed in people for their genuine strengths in a way that not everybody does. And even today, I look back, I think there's a lot that I can learn in his management style, especially when it came to trusting in people and people's core trust that most people mean well. Most people bring strengths to the table, and most people, if provided the right environment, can really thrive in that environment. And I see Gary as a person who looking back, I wouldn't have been the person that I am today without some of the fundamental building blocks that Gary built for me. I think we all would agree that he had a really gentle demeanor. I think stress management, of which I had seen many instances. I think he had an incredible way of compartmentalizing his stresses. Oftentimes, and I was part of some of those, certainly not all of those stressful situations that I'm sure that he went through as part of running any business. And I remember him as being a person who would essentially, look at the problem, had an amazing innate ability to lock it up in a compartment of his brain, go home, sleep on it probably. I never had the chance to necessarily interact with him on this particular topic or how he managed this, but this is purely observational on my part. And then, I think he would just have a trust that things generally have a way of resolving themselves, either through time or through iterative, problem solving, bringing in multiple people into the problem. And that was his way of not wanting to jump to a conclusion, not wanting to provide knee-jerk responses, even if in some cases they might have been the right answer from the beginning. He kind of took his time to work through problems and untangle them. And things definitely had a way of working themselves out. If I had to make a meme on Gary today, a TikTok meme, he'd be seen as the guy who walked in at 7 a.m. with a handful of files, and then he walked out again with a handful of files. I think he loved his binders quite dearly, and he was a very paper and pen person in a way that I actually appreciate now. I look back and I have this photographic memory of him having written up a number of my reports as a review that he would have done, and his notes were always very neatly tucked aside on the right margin at a 30-degree angle, usually written in pencil. So I still have this very vivid memory of, yeah. My desk was right outside his desk, right outside his office, rather. And I had this unique physical vantage point of, I guess, understanding the kind of role that he played in the company. I know people came to him for his ability to absorb, provide a shoulder. And I think people trusted in his ability to provide a certain perspective, which is why people often walked into him. I remember, his door would get shut at 2 in the afternoon, and then somebody would, like Paul or somebody like you, Alex, would go in there, and 2 hours later, you guys both have smiles on your faces, and you come out. And I have no idea what had happened behind the scenes, but I can only imagine that he had been helpful in some way to you going into that room, either discussing your normal business affairs or maybe potentially solving a problem. So he was that kind of person who was always a sounding board, somebody who had the ability to absorb probably more than he reflected. And I think that's immensely, it's an attractive personality when it came to people who are seeking counsel. Before I close, I just wanted to share a story, which is certainly leaving it on a bit of a high note. So Gary interviewed me, and he hired me back in 2010. Like I said, I would have been 25 at the time. After a few months, once I got comfortable to knowing Gary, I don't remember what the exact setting would have been, but it was a light setting. It was a casual setting. So I casually asked him, I gathered the courage to ask him, hey, Gary, just had a question for you. You interviewed me almost 4 months before you extended me an offer. Why did it take so long? And he gave me a deep look, and he said, Nishant, I can really be honest with you now. You were not our number one choice. You were our number two. And here I am thinking, that's an interesting, odd way of answering that question. And then he gave me a little bit of perspective, which, to be honest, I still carry today, and that's the way I conduct. I think I try to conduct my life today. He told me, oftentimes I found that number twos work out way better than number ones, because number twos bring hard work, an element of hard work that number ones take for granted. And so in a way, number two is the more optimized personality that doesn't take things for granted, is not a hotshot, is not a hero, doesn't try to be a hero in every situation, just brings in certainly an element of intelligence, which I hope I did, but from his perspective, number twos often worked out better than number one. So yeah, so that was classic Gary, honest, encouraging, and focused on what mattered, humility, and just very clean and fresh, truthful perspectives. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Nishant. In my eyes, you're always number one. If Gary Gunther is online, you could unmute yourself. Are you there with us, Gary?
Yes, I am. And can you hear me okay?
Okay. We don't see you, so if you're on camera, that's fine. But just want to take this opportunity to introduce Gary Gunther, who is our Director of Business Development, and Gary Gunther is one of the originals. In fact, it was quite frankly because of Gary that we acquired Canadian Meter Services. Longer story from the time I met Gary at a trade show, met the company, the rest is history. But Gary was certainly one of the originals, and also grateful for his continued contribution. So Gary, over to you.
Thanks, Paul. Just a couple comments. There's a lot of new people there I do not know, but one of the nicknames I got, and Gary, he used to laugh a lot about it, but Emmett Brown, and I'm not sure how many of you remember who Emmett Brown is, but he was the kind of the crazy professor in Back to the Future. Like I say, not many people would remember that. Gary, I could carry on about all the things he's done, all the great things he's done for Rodan, but obviously, even just up till now, everybody has made these comments to stuff. But I'd like to speak a little bit about Gary on the lighter side. Like I say, my nickname was Emmett Brown. For a while, Gary's nickname was Whiskers, and that was a name that I guess I gave him until he did shave it off. And it was kind of funny. Anyway, Gary was always a good guy. He always tried to beat Bob Tatarka coming in the office. He wanted to be the first guy in. I don't know about the last guy out. Several times he was, but I would say primarily he used to beat Bob Tatarka in. And that was like 7 or so in the morning. So you can imagine him getting up, getting ready for work, travel to work, and, sort of be there ahead of time. A couple of other things that I would comment about is, yes, I was with Canadian Meter Services. And yes, Gary knew who they were. But the funny thing is about it is the staff at Canadian Meter Services was Robert Hayward, his wife, and two, I guess, his wife's sisters worked there. I won't mention their names, but they kind of got the nickname of the Twisted Sisters. Long story, kind of humorous, kind of funny, but he and I often laughed about that. One of the other things was that I had visioned one time coming to work, and outside near the front doors would be a large compressor that you towed around behind a vehicle. And from this compressor was, lines and hoses coming into the office. And I could kind of feel and smell the taste of concrete. So when I walked in, there was an air compressor. It was actually a concrete jackhammer. And that jackhammer happened to be in Gary's office. And they jackhammered out the concrete in one section of his office, put rebar in, extra strength concrete to hold up all his binders. So it was kind of funny. One of the other funny things is that, and he would nickname me with this, but he and I jostled about it a fair bit. I had been out to a customer. I can't remember the name of the customer right now, but a couple days after that, this customer had called up and asked for Gary. And of course, they transferred the phone to Gary Nunes. And so because there's two Garys, there was a bit of a mix-up. But this customer and Gary said, "No, I'm not Gary Gunther. I'm Gary Nunes. I'm in the office." And this customer, he said, "Well, I don't know which one of you that I really should talk to, but I had a guy come and visit me. He was kind of an old fat guy. And so that was kind of the nickname kind of stuff that Gary used to convince with me about. And it was kind of interesting. It was pretty good. The other story I would mention, and I'm not sure if Boris is there today, Paul, but one of the things that you could get Gary excited about was he would go and get groceries, and the people there would say, "Do you want your groceries in bags?" And he would always get ticked off that they would ask him that, because he just felt that just by being, sort of a good organization, you would bag up your groceries and then, off you'd go and you'd take them home. But he had mentioned that story, and Boris and I used to laugh about it. And if we really wanted to get a rise out of Gary, then we would mention bags and groceries. It was kind of funny, kind of funny. So in closing off, yes, Gary was a good guy. I had known him since he came to Rodan. He contributed a lot. Like I say, a very good guy. You could learn from him. He could teach you things. And quite frankly, he was great to work with. I really enjoyed it. And I'm sure everybody will miss him. Like I say, some people there that are new may not recognize him, but good guy. He was the young, slim guy. I was the old, fat guy. So, anyway, that closes that off, Paul. Wish Kathy and your family well. Hope everything works out okay. Anyway, thanks for the opportunity, Paul.
Thank you, Gary, and thank you, Corey, as well. Unfortunately, Boris couldn't make it today, but Boris, Kathy will be there. Him and Lydia will be at the funeral on Saturday, so he'll have a chance to pass on his best wishes and condolences. I'll now ask if Barry Simpson is online. He has to say a few words. I know Barry is in the field, so he wasn't sure whether he was going to be able to make it. Barry, with us? Okay, I don't see him on. Oh, here he comes. Barry, can you hear us? You're on mute if you are trying to speak. Okay, I guess you're not able to join us, but Barry did wanted to say a few words, and he worked also very closely with Gary Nunes. Now let's move on to somebody who also worked very closely with Gary Nunes, somebody who is an alumni who has come back to the fold, Penny McLeod. Penny, please. You can either hold this or pin it on you. We'll do that.
Yeah.
Hold this.
Yeah. Hey, everybody.
Hello.
Gary interviewed me. I can remember that interview was pretty stressful. Rick Goddard was there and Gary was there. I can't remember if there was I think Rodan was there in my interview. And it was on my birthday. So it was a very special day for me. So I thought this was a bonus. And I thought I did really well in the interview. And everybody thanked me and I went home. That was March 30th, by the way, 2011. And then I got an email from HR. I think it was Natalie Van Fleet. And she said, we'd like you to hire you. And we'd like you to come in for May 1st, 2011. And I said, sure, that's great. So I came to the office and I knocked on the front door and Gary answered the door and he welcomed me and he took me through the whole office and everything. And I said, so where do I sit? Where do I start my new job? And he said, well, right here. And I went over to the chair and there was a monkey sitting in my chair. And for those of you who don't know, Rick Goddard, who was my supervisor, had it was a monkey, it was a toy, stuffed toy. His niece had given him, and he, for some reason, kept us in the office, and it became a mascot. So if you ever look at past history pictures, you will always see the monkey. Well, the monkey was sitting in my chair, and I said to Gary, so is this the thing or person that's been doing the job? And he said, apparently not, but he says, if you can do a better job, we'll remove him. So Rick was not there that week. He was on vacation. So Gary took the time that whole week to help me get oriented and get used to my surroundings. I was a little disturbed about the monkey and thought, well, if I can do a better job than the monkey, then I think I'll be here for a while. And that was 14 years ago.
Thank you, Penny. I think Barry Simpson is online. He was there for a minute. Barry, are you with us? Sort of came in and out. Barry, can you hear us?
I think he's muted, Paul.
Barry, you're muted. I saw him come up on camera a minute ago. Okay. The connection may be sketchy out in West Stereo. Okay, we're still here, Barry. If you want to join us, just come back online. And thank you, Penny, for those very kind words. I'll ask somebody who worked closely with Gary from a business development perspective. I'd like to invite Andrew Lamb to say a few words. Andrew.
Oh, you probably can't hear it because it's on my hearing aids.
Okay.
I can't hear anything. Oh, take it off.
All right, thanks. Thanks, Paul.
So from the business development perspective, Gary was certainly widely respected by clients, regulators, of course, colleagues alike, folks here today, deeply admired, and absolutely privileged to work with Gary and be mentored by Gary. So the first time I spoke to Gary was actually during my interview process. And so back then we had these phone mock interviews. So Rodan sent me the proposal, said, here's the circumstance, you're going to call it this time, and that's going to be a Rodan client utility.
I think I'll use your phone.
You have to walk through, go through this, discussion with them and then try to reach a next step, right? So super nervous, right? Call, rings a few times, Gary picks up. I said, hi, this is Andrew Lamb calling from Rodan Energy Solutions. How are you today? And Gary goes, who? Andrew, who? From Rodan? You're calling from Rodan? Yeah, I'm Andrew calling from Rodan. And then he goes, oh, right, I'm the client. So I hear shuffling of papers, and then we go into the call. And I gotta say, that was probably, it's the first time I talked to Gary, but it was one of the very few times that I think it caught him off guard. Because he was so technical, so detail oriented. And look, during that call, he certainly sounded like the grumpy utility guy that wasn't happy about something, and he put me through the ringer. So I was lucky to pass the test. So when my first day here, I came to the office, and I'm thinking, Gary, oh man, I got to meet Gary. He's a tough cookie, So I go and introduce myself, and super warm, right? And I learned pretty quickly that certainly he was abiding by the script from HR, because he was so warm, so welcoming, so caring, and so willing to share. And I think that's with all the knowledge that he's had over the years, it's sharing internally with all of us, but also with our clients. We trusted advisor. Oftentimes they call him for advice, kind of his feedback, his experience, and I know we've been talking about, what's Rodan's secret sauce on the business development side. White glove service. That's one of them. And I truly believe, having Gary mentored me, that's part of that he was part of that foundation of establishing a white glove service for our customers. It's all about binders. That was part of my training process, was through binders. And it was frightening because he just ran, I'd ask him a question and it turned, kind of like Sean was saying, to like an hour and a half, 2 hour meeting with all these binders to think through. And he knew perfectly where to go to explain to me market rules or a client site or all these things. And it was unbelievable, his memory and, his ability to do that. He did also have a very, was like kind of dry and cheeky sense of humor, right? So every so often as I'm, trying to figure something out, I have a question, I knock on his door, I said, hey, can I come? I got a quick question. Come on. I only look at something real quick, right? And he turns his monitor open. And there's one of them, it was a news article about osprey nests at an LDC. It was a real problem. Okay, so they had to send resources to move these nests and get a conservation authority involved. Anyways, at that time, we had just had now Rodan alumni move over to this LDC, and he kind of looked at me and said, well, I guess we know why they hired him. So, he had that very deep knowledge, very humble, very thoughtful, and always willing to share his time and experience. So, of course, it's going to be very deeply missed. And I think his legacy lives on in, the relationships that he's nurtured with many of us. So thank you.
So I think Barry has come back online. Barry, are you with us? I know you're using John Gordon's phone from what you've said.
Yes, I'm on John Gordon's phone now.
Excellent. We could hear you clearly now. We can't see you, but we could hear you.
Okay. Paul had asked me if I had a humorous story I could tell about Gary, and I did have one come to mind, but I'll start off with Gary Gunther actually recruited me to Rodan to go in for an interview. And when I come in for the interview, it was Paul and Boris, Bob Tatarka, and Gary Nunes. And after about 10 minutes, I figured out Gary Nunes was the only one there that knew about metering. After I was there for probably half a year, Gary had recruited Orangeville Hydro as one of our clients to do their commercial industrial metering because he'd been doing some work with them before he joined Rodan. So he asked me if I would go up and be sort of an implanted meter technician for Orangeville Hydro, and he said he'd take me up there and introduce me to the staff. What Gary didn't know was I was born and grew up in Orangeville, and I knew almost all the people that worked in the office. So when I got there, the office manager, it turned out her husband worked for Ontario Hydro, and they'd been to a couple of parties at my place, and they seemed to remember a whole lot more about them than I did, which kind of shocked Gary a little bit. So then he took me in to meet the manager, George Dick. So he introduced me, and George immediately said to Gary, I can't work with this guy. And Gary had a bit of a shocked look on his face. But as it turned out, about 20 years previous to that, I was the supervisor of customer service and metering for Ontario Hydro in the Orangeville area office, which is located right in the town of Orangeville, but we service the surrounding area. At that time, I had a meter reader a meter technician that was retiring, and George Dick stopped in to see me about getting a job there. He had just joined Orangeville Hydro about 5 months before, and he was there as a meter reader, but he was interested in becoming a meter tech. He had a really good academic background. I think it was Mohawk College. He graduated with electrical engineering technicians. And It would have been a good opportunity for him, but unfortunately, because it was with Ontario Hydro, I had to go with a union member that was surplus in a job at another location. I had to turn George down. So George accounted that story off to Gary that he wouldn't be able to work with me. But actually, George and I had been friends ever since then. He fully understood the situation at that time, and he just wanted to pull a fast one on Gary, and it really worked that day. Other than that, I guess as I worked with the smaller utilities and then have to have questions come up about the OEB regulations and concerning metering and billing, Gary was always my go-to man to get the proper answer. If I didn't get it right away, I knew I'd get it the next day because he'd pull it out of one of those many binders he had in his office that everybody mentions. In the last few years, when I come in, I'd always stop into Gary's office and poke my head in and say, "Oh, the shelving hasn't collapsed yet. You're still alive." Gary was always a great guy to work with, and I always appreciated his guidance and help in doing my own job. And I really miss him. I think that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Barry. That was really touching. We have one quick last remark before we wrap up. Apologies taking a little longer than we anticipated, but it's a very valuable event, and I thank again all of you for such lovely remarks. Rachel Ingram was hoping to be here, and as I mentioned earlier, she was had to deal with an emergency with her mother, but passed on some written greetings. Rachel was our general counsel, worked very closely with Gary. Her remarks are, Gary was a lovely man, kind, calm, and gentle, and so patient with me as a newbie to the world of electricity and metering. No question was too silly, and he always took the time to talk with me when I did not understand some aspects of the business. And never expressed frustration when I asked the same question more than once. Gary was the one who helped me make sense of all the crazy acronyms in the industry, and there are a lot. He was also a funny person with a dry sense of humor and a constant twinkle in his eye. I'm grateful to have known and worked with him. His calm demeanor is something that still guides me when I am getting riled up over a work issue. I remind myself that staying calm works wonders in helping to resolve a conflict. I will not forget him. Rachel. So in conclusion, I wanted to once again thank you all for participating. I think those who did not know Gary have certainly learned a lot about him. And I want to just say, as president and co-founder of Rodan, I was really struck with sadness learning about the news of his sudden death. Gary was healthy. This was certainly something that it was really difficult to catch. He tried to eat well. He tried to exercise. He loved spending time with his active grandchildren. And so this was, I think, a shock to all of us. And so I just wanted to, kind of conclude here by saying that Gary will never be forgotten. I'm eternally grateful to Gary and to Kathy and his family for allowing him to spend as much time as he did with us, and his amazing contribution. And Rodan's success, especially in the early years, is arguably and probably arguably the most challenging times, was largely as a result of Gary's hard work together with a couple of the other originals like Alex and Gary. He believed in me and he believed in our business, and he will always be hallowed in the chronicles of Rodan as one of the originals and as a key part of Rodan's early successes. Thank you all for participating, and may he rest in peace, and may his memory be eternal. Thank you very much for participating. Thanks everybody online for participating. We're a wrap, and now we'll enjoy a nice barbecue lunch.